Okay, looks like everybody's in from the waiting room. If you guys could all turn on your camera, if that's an option, just so as our panelists are starting to talk, they know who's in the room. It's really helpful. Thank you. Okay, cool. So let's get going on behalf of the Alumni Engagement Office as well as athletics. We're pleased to have all of you guys participate in this Bulldog Connection. Welcome back for some of you who have already been to one this week. In a minute, I'm going to turn the program over to Lindsey Swanson, who's a senior on the field hockey team. And each of our panelists are going to introduce themselves. Before that, I just wanted to mention that all of you have the option to put questions in the chat feature, which is at the bottom of your screen. And at the end, hopefully, we'll have some time to open it up and allow everybody to unmute yourself and ask questions directly to the panel. But before then, Lindsey will be asking each panelist a couple of questions and we'll go from there. So if each panelist could introduce themselves, again, if you want to just share your name, what year you graduated from Bryant, as well as the sport you played while you were here, and then what you're doing now professionally. And Vinton, I'll have you go first.
How you doing, everybody? Great to see all your faces. Sad that we can't do this on campus in person like we usually do, but happy to do it anyway. My name is Vinton South. I graduated in 2010. I played football. I was a management marketing major and communications minor. And I currently work for Apple as a manager. I support our retail stores and connecting with small businesses to help them implement our technology.
Cool. Thanks, Vinton. Next, Lindsey, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. My name is Lindsey Gamble. I graduated in 2010, played on the football team with Vinton and Eloma, who will be chatting shortly. I currently work for a startup called Mavrck. It's basically an influencer marketing platform. I'm part of our services team, which is like our in-house agency. So we work with brands and social media influencers across all types of platforms and run campaigns. As you probably already know, influencers are huge. So that's kind of like my day-to-day, helping those brands strategize, execute, and support their business and marketing goals. And I'm based in the Boston area.
Cool. Thanks, Lindsey. Katie, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, my name is Katie Whittington. I graduated in 2013. I played women's basketball. My major was marketing with a minor in communications. And currently right now I work at a small outsourced marketing team. We're essentially an ad agency based in Boston. We also have an office here in the Providence area. So my role right now is a little bit of a 50-50 split in terms of account management and implementation with marketing strategies for companies that need marketing help.
Awesome, thank you. And Eloma, I'll have you go next.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eloma Johnson. I graduated in 2012 and also played on the football team with Lindsey and Vinton. Right now, I work for Sherwin as a sales professional. So I work out in the field with contractors and designers and other folks in the construction area. I studied marketing as a major with a minor in communications.
Sweet, thank you. All right, Lindsey, I'm going to turn it over to you if you want to start asking the panelists their questions.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you guys all for being here. So the first question that we have is, what skills and competencies have you found most valuable as you progress throughout your career or within your first job right out of college? And then what skills or competencies would you advocate that the people here watching should focus on while they're still in school? And I'm gonna actually just send the question also in the chat box so you can look at it. Maybe we'll have Katie, you can start, and then everybody can hop in after that.
Sure. I think as far as skills and competencies that have been most valuable, I think kind of as a bucket category, I think the ability to be a good teammate is something that's really transferable in your first job and any job that you have subsequently after. Because if you think about it, whatever you're going to do, whatever major you're in right now, and whatever job you're interviewing for, you're going to learn a lot of those skills on processes and what you're doing while you're on the job. But the other half is, are you able to work within a group of people? Are you able to, get done what you say you're going to get done? Sort of those soft skills that, fortunately as students, and I think especially as college athletes, a lot of experience with. So those would be, I think, not super hard skills, but those soft intangibles that really do go a long way no matter what level you're at in your career.
Awesome, thank you. Lindsey, would you like to go?
Sure. So kind of along with what Katie said, I think teamwork's obviously, it sounds kind of cliche, but it's super important in sports, in the real world. And I think especially, as you go in the real world, you're going to meet different people from different backgrounds, and you're going to work part of a teams. A big part of my job itself is like working within my company as well as our customers. And I kind of consider that teamwork because everyone has different goals, but in order to reach those goals, you all have to work on the same side. So even when I'm dealing with a customer that might be difficult, we have a partnership. And I think that's similar to sports where maybe you and someone are playing the same position and you're both kind of going for that spot. Ideally, you want to do what's best for the team and kind of be competitive. So teamwork's a really big aspect. I think communication and like relationship building, that kind of goes a long way too. Just being able to communicate with people, outside of just like verbal text, but being able to kind of build that relationship with people, it's just as important as having those skills. You could be the greatest marketer, but if you can't build a relationship and get people to buy into you or to kind of like you, it's tough to have as much success as you can with those skills. So I'd say teamwork, communication, and relationship building are the most important things.
Sounds good, thank you. And then Vinton or Eloma, either of you can hop in there.
Sure, I'll jump in. Another thing that I think is really important and I think is often one that you would think would go without saying is goal setting and having a drive for results. I think as athletes, we're really competitive just naturally. It's one of the things that I guess continues to drive us towards wanting to put in the work at practice and in the weight room and all the different things that we have to do to thrive as an athlete, especially in the environment that you guys are in at Bryant. But setting really clear goals and then being able to work with other people towards working towards those goals, all pulling in the same direction. I think one of the things that our coaches used to say all the time, because football, there's a lot of us on the field at once, is you do your 1/11th, don't try to do somebody else's job. And in the workplace, I would say it goes a long way understanding what your role is and playing that role towards the common goal with everybody else. So definitely a drive for results, understanding what the company is going after, what the North Star is, I guess you could say, and what your role to play in to help towards meeting those goals.
Yeah, I would just ditto onto what everyone said, but I definitely would agree with Vinton in terms of being able to set goals and achieve them. And then the other thing that Lindsey had mentioned is also communication. I think the biggest pitfall is assuming or thinking that the other person is understanding what you're communicating or saying. So being able to effectively communicate whatever agenda or task that you have, and then being able to go out and achieve it is something that a lot of employers value. And I think as athletes, we bring that to the table because that's something that, we're competitive and we experience. So being able to put that all together and then apply it is huge.
Definitely, thank you. So now you guys have touched on a bit the skills that are needed moving forward. But one of the things that we wanted to know was what part of your experience as an athlete or being part of a team resonated most positively with employers during your interview process? So was that something that you highlighted a lot? Would you find, common ground with an employer? So I think people just want to hear a bit about your experience. And any of you can hop in and go.
I can go. I would say, I've been out of out of college for 10 years now, and I would say like football, in my experience, and like Brian in general, has always come up in the interview process much more than like what I learned in the classroom. That's very important. But as a student athlete, you have this unique, you're in a unique position. Everyone loves sports for the most part, and not everyone has a chance to, do it in college. So you're really in a unique position of having an opportunity. I think with, especially with my experience at Brian and just sports throughout my career, time management has been something I've been, blessed to be able to be good at due to sports. So I think, in the interview process, or whenever you get into the working field, people want to know, like, can you manage your time? It's not just about like working these long hours, but can you be efficient with your time? Can you do the things you need to do by the day that they do? And I think a lot of time, like, especially in this role now, we're multitasking so much. It's important to know like what to do first versus what not to do. And I think as a student athlete, you're going to class, you have practice, you have games, you have your social life. You have to balance so much. And I think the saying's like, give the busiest person like the tasks or whatever the task, they'll figure it out. And I think that is in line with like student athletes. You have so much on your plate, but you always find a way to do it. So I would definitely lean into your ability to juggle all these different things while still being a student and, a person that wants to enjoy the college experience. So I often touch upon that. We kind of talked about teamwork too. Everyone wants someone that's a good team player from the lowest employee all the way to the top. So those are things that I've always kind of focused on and felt like people that I've talked to resonated a lot.
I can jump in also. One of the things that I think came up pretty often, especially because of most of the roles that I've had have been leadership positions since graduation. I think the first job I took was a management position with Target, and I had 40 people that reported to me on the first day. So leadership is something that you don't necessarily have to be a captain in a sport to learn. A lot of you guys may not be the captains on your teams. You may be earlier in your college sport career, but you can still lead without authority. And I think having the ability to kind of bring people with you and lead from the front and be the example is important in the workplace, mostly because titles really only go so far. I work for a company now that's a fairly flat organization. Apple, as big as it is, they're pretty, there's not a lot of titles being thrown around. You can give feedback in any direction. There's a lot of people that really appreciate you being able to have an understanding of what the company is going after and how you can help them get there from the front. So leadership without authority is really important. For those of you that have heard your coaches tell you that you need to be the example of what the right thing looks like on campus, it's not because you're the leader of the students. It's because as a student athlete, that's kind of an extra responsibility that we take on. So if you're able to do that and express that in an interview setting in the workplace, I think it'll definitely work out in your favor.
Yeah, I would just add to that with what Vinton said with leadership is being able to cultivate a team. Very rarely when you get into the working world that you're going to be working by yourself or isolated. You're going to have to interact with other departments or interact with other folks. So I'd say being able to cultivate a team environment, encouraging everyone and building an environment that everybody feels safe and they can work together to achieve whatever the company's goal is or whatever your department's goal is, also helps, especially because you're going to be working with people from different backgrounds, speak different languages, whatever it might be. Being able to connect and bring everybody together towards one common goal is huge.
And I agree with what everyone had said. But I think too, being able to show the change that you've gone through from your freshman year to your senior year, similar to what Lindsey said, you're juggling, not only your academics, but you want to play. So there's a lot of things I think from your freshman year to your senior year, you're learning, you're growing, and then you have that responsibility of passing it on. So being able to, I think, articulate and show through your experiences, how you were able to come full circle or how you were able to face, a challenging situation and you came out on the other side. I think those are things that are unique to the student athlete experience. And I don't know how much you can really learn that just in the classroom. So being able to really look at it holistically and kind of articulate what it is that you've learned and how you've grown is also something to keep in mind.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So the next question that we have is geared a lot towards, current graduating seniors. So we want to know, how did you adjust to life after college athletics? We've heard from a lot of people that it's been pretty difficult because being an athlete is like such a huge part of their identity. So we just want to know how you dealt with this. Do you guys still continue to play your sport? Do you coach? Did you ever coach? Anything like that?
I would say definitely find a hobby of some sort. I know once I graduated and was finished playing football, I was playing like on flag football teams and indoor outdoor leagues. So I think finding, at least for me, finding an outlet where I was able to still kind of be competitive and get out that competitive juice was important. So finding something where you can kind of spend that time is the way I was able to adjust and slowly wean off. I know some folks go into coaching and doing that, but being able to still be competitive in a sport or in some type of activity or hobby was helpful.
I know it's difficult once we get out of the sport. I played football for, I think it was 17 years. I played from the first day that you were allowed to sign up until my 5th year at Bryant. So that was a pretty long time in my life. And some of you probably aren't much older than 17, which is scary. It was a really long time. And when I got out, it was, I never had a semester of school without football. I was a December grad because I redshirted, and I kind of went from being a student athlete and never had that like last semester that most fall sport athletes get of just being a student to slowly integrate out of my sport. So I kind of hit the real world like 4 weeks later, and it was kind of felt like a fish out of water after the initial, like, I'm excited to work thing happened. I think staying close to the other athletes that you played with, and I think being really close to the guys on our team helped. We do the old timer tell war stories about all, like the good old days, and some of that reminiscing I think is helpful. Definitely get hobbies and ways to kind of let off some steam. I know a lot of guys would like go to the gym and hit the gym really hard still, and if there wasn't the motivation of being good at your sport, I guess the motivation of not letting the post athletic body hit you was maybe one of it. But whatever you got to do to kind of understand like that your sport may not be who you are as your identity, no matter how many years you played. I think sometimes we consider ourselves, when you're on campus, you're an athlete, right? You constantly rock your sport, and oh, this person's on this team, and that's kind of what you're known by. Find your niche outside and be the person outside of college that maybe doesn't identify with that one thing. Hobbies help if you really miss it. I gave an ACL to football, so that wasn't an option after graduation. Hobbling around some of those flag football leagues wasn't enjoyable. But I definitely think it's something to think about when you graduate, where you're going to really exercise your time and put your energy, because you spend a ton of time doing it.
Yeah, I'd say too, it's definitely a period of transition. I remember since I played basketball, we had, postseason in the spring, which obviously my senior year I didn't participate in. But when that upcoming fall came, you sort of have this indifferent feeling. It's not the best feeling in the world. It's not the worst feeling in the world, but, you see people on campus, you see your teams practicing, and it's like that first realization that this goes on without you. And I don't mean that in a selfish way, but it's like, wow, this is something that continues without you. So the adjustment, you'll get through it as you've gotten through, whatever year you're in at Bryant. But being able to, like these guys have said, is find something where you can kind of channel that passion, whether it's through playing in leagues, or if it's something, you dive into work and you're able to transfer some of those, those passions that you have, the intensity, the grit, that's all really relatable to what you do at your job. But as far as, trying to remove yourself from that being your own identity, it's a bit of a struggle, but it's something you're going to be able to get used to really quick.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I mean, to this day, I still miss football. And, football was out, for 8 years of my life in high school and college. Football was like everything I knew. And, when you're a student athlete, you have dreams of like going and playing professionally. And I explored some smaller opportunities like indoor football and overseas and whatnot, and decided like this was the time to move on and kind of start that new chapter. And it was really a period of like self-discovery, as Vinton, some other folks said. You're a student athlete. You're always like the athlete. You usually, if you're in college, you're usually like the top players from your high school, and everyone kind of knows you as that. And it's when you're no longer playing that sport, it's kind of like what are you known as? Like what's kind of like your goal? And I think for the half year after graduating, it was something that I kind of like thought about a lot. And to this day, I still have dreams about playing football, and it's so weird. But eventually you get through that. You find new hobbies, you find new things to be passionate about. But what I've really found to be valuable is just like keeping those experiences, those memories, whether you're going back to Brian and seeing some of the folks after you graduated, or, even when you're watching your particular sport, you can always have those conversations about your own experience. Memories are a great way to kind of cherish those things. And again, you've had the opportunity that a lot of people don't have. So it's kind of like embrace it. So for you guys that are still in college and have the opportunity to, when you play, the next season of sports or whatever it is, those days that it sucks, going to practice or like you don't want to do something, just cherish them, because at some point they're going to be gone, and you're going to kind of wish that you had the opportunity. Like I don't miss so much playing football games. I miss being around 100 other guys on the team and cracking jokes and traveling and whatnot. But as with everything, you kind of get, you get past it and find new hobbies, and you cherish those memories and eventually move on.
Awesome, thank you. And Vinton, I'm glad you mentioned how you played into the fall of your 5th year and you didn't have a semester without football. I think right now a lot of seniors at Bryan and at other schools are going through that. We are having, as of right now, a season in the spring instead of in the fall. So I think hearing kind of how your experience was, going right from playing to, the real world is helpful for people. So the next question that we have is, what advice do you wish that somebody had given you at the start of your career that you would like to offer to us now?
I would say it's a long game. I graduated. I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but I was a marketing major. A communication major with a minor in business administration marketing. I was always really passionate about social media and writing and everything. But I just, I graduated 2010. I just now got into like the social media space professionally, like, 2 or 3 years ago. Up until that point, I worked in cancer research, but worked on a lot of passion projects. Since a lot of us are busy with sports, I didn't do an internship. So that's something that I kind of regret doing. And hopefully a lot of you are taking advantage of that opportunity. But also know, like, you're going to work the rest of your life. So like, you never have, your dream job doesn't have to be the one that you get right out of college. It's kind of like a journey. So you might work a job that you're not super passionate about, but you utilize it as an experience to, meet people, to learn, to kind of get into the working field, and just kind of you leverage each opportunity, knowing that the more you build on each, the better you'll get into that role that you want. So just thinking about your career as a long game versus like, I have to have the dream job right out of college. Some people get lucky, but for the most of people, and I think even myself, it took me, 6 or 7 years to get to a job that I really liked in a space that I really liked. And things kind of happen quick, just like when you're playing sports. You kind of hit a groove, and I think that's similar to how your career can go.
I would continue with that. I like how Lindsey made that analogy of it's a journey, because I think as you go through your journey in your career life, networking is probably the biggest thing that I would that I wish I had done more of earlier on, because throughout your different jobs, throughout your different experiences, you meet all types of people, and you never know when that might circle back around. So definitely network, meet people, learn about what other people are doing and what you have interest in. If you're still not sure about, what industry or what field you want to go into, use it as an opportunity to just reach out to folks and, just ask them. Our Bryan alumni, directory is huge. So even using that, just reaching out to folks in different areas that you might be interested in or not sure about, to gain some experience and some knowledge and see if, there might be an opportunity there. So I think networking is something that you should continually do as you go throughout that journey, because you never know who you might know and who might know someone else that could get you that dream job that you're looking for, or get you an experience in a field or an area that you've wanted to. So go ahead, Vinton.
Thanks, EJ. One of the first things I wrote down when you asked the question, I wrote slow down. It's one of the, as an athlete, as soon as you get there, you want to contribute right away. And I think you have that mindset of, I'm going to get on the field or on the court or whatever your space is that you play a sport in immediately, and help help, I guess, contribute to your team's winning. But in the workplace, it's much different. It's not something that you're seasoned at, right? Like, you played that sport, you made to the Division I level, and you built a pretty large skill set to be able to maybe contribute at a high level early on. Once you get out into the workplace, you've been in school for however many years and you've done a lot of preparation, but there's a ton of learning that you do in that first 30, 60, 90 days, 1 year in whatever field you'll get into. And one of the things I think a lot of us make the mistake of is our ambition gets ahead of the understanding that we still need to learn. Go in, build relationships, meet people, shake hands, take notes, show up, like all those different things I think are overlooked with the heightened level of like needing to succeed right away. Sometimes the expectation isn't that you come in and you hit the ground running. I remember in the first 2 roles that I had outside of school, my boss told me, like, hey, slow down. Like, we don't expect you to be good at your job yet. So take this time where you have this grace period to just learn as much as you possibly can. Make the mistakes now when it's not your responsibility and all the eyes aren't on you to be the one that's at the forefront of it. So I think when you get there, you're going to be you really want to be gung-ho about making stuff happen. But I think slowing down and building relationships, meeting people, paying attention to the little things are going to be really important.
Yeah, similarly, I think, when you start your first job, you're going, from a college senior where you're, a little bit more seasoned in your sport, and your first job, like Vinton and Eloma has mentioned, you're not going to be contributing right away, or your role is going to be very minimal. But being okay with that and knowing that, again, it's a process. Like how you got to Bryant, that was a process, years in the making. And similarly with work, it's okay to start at the bottom, because you're going to start at the bottom. But you've been through that experience of working your way up. And that's something I think similarly I felt when I first started, is like, oh, let me get in, let me contribute. And all of a sudden your role is so minimal, but that's okay. I think it's doing that role to the best of your ability, and taking advantage of where you're at, asking questions, picking the brains of the people that you work with. And as you do that, you'll continue to grow. And I think it'll be good advice for you guys.
Thank you. So that's actually all of the questions that we had in advance. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. You can also send a message to everybody, or you can send it to Lily or Jessica or me. But yeah, if anybody has any other questions, we can take those now.
Awesome. Sorry, I thought I froze there for a sec. Well, first, thank you all so much for being here and sharing your wealth of knowledge and experiences. I think we all just really value this so much. So I just like wrote down like so much. Oh my gosh, that was amazing. I think my question first was for Vinton. You mentioned something I really needed to hear, which was to slow down. And I think that's something that's really meaningful right now. Because like, you know, a lot of us are seniors and we're all preparing for graduation. How might you suggest seniors right now to really like slow down and enjoy the moment with so much uncertainty?
Sure, thanks for asking. And I'm going to say something that's probably off script, but it's fine. So I've never met you before. I don't know who you are. I knew you were going to be the first person that raised your hand. I knew it because I've seen how active you are outside of whatever is happening right here in this moment. And that's a good thing. That's you do a really good job of marketing yourself. And I literally was expecting you to ask a question because I've seen the things that you're doing outside of this. So
Much for that.
Yeah, no problem. Whatever you're doing, it's working. And if anyone wants an example of how to make sure that the alumni network know who you are to possibly get a job someday, do whatever it is she's doing. So back to your question. I took a really good piece of advice from a professor. I don't know if any of you have had Professor Rothline before, but I thought I really knew what I wanted to do. I got a great internship doing real estate development down outside of New York City, back where I live. And I thought that's the job I wanted to do. I wanted to build high rises. I originally wanted to be an architect, and then Brian didn't do that, and that's where I could play football. So I figured it out from there. And project management and all that stuff kind of came into play. And I did the internship. I excelled at it and got an offer and declined the offer because I hated every single day that I was at work there. And I got back to school and was like, well, now I got to start over and it's a little late. I don't know what to do. And Professor Rothline told me to try something that I never thought I'd want to do. So you found your dream job and you got it and it sucked. So now what? And I was like, well, I guess going to the opposite end of that spectrum is something that I wouldn't have normally challenged myself on. But having a professor that was invested in my learning and wanted to see me be successful someday was really, really important. He understood my skill set. I had a couple conversations with Target, and I was like, I'd never even used the cash register on my phone. How am I going to lead in a retail environment? I don't understand retail. I'd never done it. What am I going to do there? And Professor Rothline urged me to kind of give it a shot if it was a great opportunity. And I made a 9-year career out of it. I excelled and did really well for myself and was able to kind of parlay that into my role right now that I have at Apple. So I think taking a risk was a part of the slowdown process. Like Lindsey said, it took him 7 years to get to the job that he originally set out to get outside of college, because you kind of have to slow play some of these roles and some of these companies that you want to work for and continue to build skills outside of that dream job to eventually get there. So part of that slowdown for me was trying something I never thought that I would want to do or could do or would enjoy doing, and ended up loving it and stayed there for quite a long time until it was time for me to make the switch. So it's really the best piece of information that I got was from Professor Rothline. And that's why I am where I am today, is because his advice.
That's so wonderful to hear. And thank you for sharing all of that. And if any of the other panelists maybe want to touch on that, I know we already went through some advice, but maybe on that same note, that'd be really awesome. Thanks again, Vinton.
All right, well, if nobody else has any responses right now for that question, thank you, Amanda, for that. It was a really good question. One of the other questions that came in was just wondering, what is something that you wish you had participated in or taken more advantage of while you were still at Bryant as a student? And would that, do you think, have made things easier for you, or if you have any thoughts looking back?
I can jump in on this one. I think taking advantage of getting to know people outside your sport, which is tough. I mean, you're on the same schedule, you eat lunch together, you go lift together, you do all of that together. But I wish, looking back now, that I took advantage of like meeting other people who, you know, either played sports or didn't play sports. Because when you get into the workforce, you know, you're kind of an anomaly being a student athlete. It's a rare occurrence, it's unique. So you're working with a lot of people who are very different than you. So I think that would have been something I would have wanted to take more advantage of if I could do it again.
I would say, like I mentioned earlier, I didn't do any internships throughout Bryant. So I think that was something, whether it was like the Career Center, just, leveraging the Bryant network when it came to like internships and kind of setting myself up for, I guess, putting myself in a better position after graduation. So that's something I always think about. I think also, being a communications major, Bryant has like the radio show. So when I graduated after college, I actually started like a music blog and started like doing interviews, like interview artists like Kendrick Lamar, and did like a ton of stuff around music. And it's kind of funny because I wasn't necessarily interested at Bryant. And so I kind of thought back, I'm like, I wish I kind of did something similar to that at Bryant, because I probably would have been able to gain even more experience and while I was in college, and leverage that even more after college. So Bryant, colleges in general have so many different resources, so many different clubs, so many, equipment, technology. So whatever you're interested in, figure out what on campus you can kind of dive into, outside of just playing sports.
Yeah, I would just add to that what Lindsey said, just taking advantage of all the different clubs and programs that Bryant has to offer. I don't think I was able to fully take advantage of some of those until like later on in my senior year when I also had the extra semester. But I think just getting around and like ditto to what Katie said, like meeting other people who don't play sports, or even people who play different sports, just getting out there and getting more involved in meeting people in different clubs and learning about those and what they have to offer. I wish I had a chance to do more of that. So.
So I actually have a question for Vinton. You mentioned that you got that really great advice from one of your professors. And I was just wondering, I know a lot of younger student athletes, it goes for all ages, but especially when you're coming in, it can be kind of intimidating to start forming those relationships with your professors. And as you mentioned, it's very important and can be life-changing to do so. So do you have any advice for the student athletes here on probably like the best way to kind of make those connections?
Yeah, I would say pay attention to who is doing what. You guys are really involved with different things through the idea program that happened, I think, freshman year, that they're doing again, and the department chairs and all those professors that kind of lead the different areas that you're interested in. So whoever the department chair is of the marketing department, if you go and during an office hour ask them to connect with you, I know it's intimidating. Trust me, it's not something that was comfortable for me to do when I had interviews coming up and it was in an industry that I wasn't familiar with. And I went to a professor and said, hey, I'm interviewing with this company. I think I had an interview with Raytheon. And that's how I connected with Professor Rothline, because someone happened to tell me that he used to work for them. And I was like, hey, I have an interview with Raytheon. I don't know anything about anything that they do, but I'm trying to get a job. And he gave me some pointers, and that's how we kind of connected and stayed connected. To this day, I still talk to him, and he has kids, and his sons used to come to the sideline of our football games. And I think building and cultivating those relationships with people that are really invested in your future is important. Figure out who they are. It's not a secret. The teachers that really want you to do well, they'll let themselves be known. The ones that kind of give you that coach speech on that they might be disappointed in something that you did in class or some work that you handed in, or ones that give you a little bit of extra advice in coaching when it comes to what you're doing in the classroom, they're the ones that are really invested. And there's a ton of professors at Bryant that'll really go above and beyond outside of their normal role to help you. So it's really just keep your eyes open and figure out which ones are the ones that are kind of putting themselves out there, and put yourself out there, take advantage of the opportunity.
Awesome, thank you. So the next question is, can each of you talk a little bit more about what your day-to-day life is at your job in general, and then what changes have happened since the pandemic, and if you guys are working from home, kind of how that's been for you?
Yeah, I can go. So as I mentioned earlier, so I work for Mavrck. It's a startup company. It's a SaaS platform. My day-to-day, it changes a lot. So I have like a book of business of 10 to 15 brands that I run influencer marketing campaigns for. So like a Tyson, Shark Ninja, GoPro, Weber Grill. So a lot of these, big brands, and, depending on what their contract is, I'll do more planning or strategy with them. And ideally help them execute, campaigns on TikTok, Instagram, all the different platforms out there. And while like the actual goal is kind of similar, the day-to-day is so different because there's so many things that come up, from just customer challenges to things that customers need. I think a lot of my day is around revolves around problem solving, and finding solutions for challenges that pop up with influencers or a campaign. I think relating it back to the pandemic, a lot of people lost jobs, so kind of adapting to that process of some clients no longer being with that brand and pausing campaigns. So outside the work itself, the biggest change has been work from home. Mavrck was pretty remote friendly, so working from home for me and the rest of our company was not hard at all, which I feel like we're blessed to have that ability. So instead of working from home 2 to 3 days a week, I work from home every day. And we kind of found it really, valuable, really easy to use, like valuable tools like Slack and Zoom and everything else that all companies are using to really still business as usual without, despite not seeing your fellow colleagues. And we thankfully didn't have to let go anyone. And I know it's a very different than some of the other companies out there. I think it's difficult. I definitely struggle with, being in my place, by myself for most of the day. My girlfriend goes to work, and I think that's the biggest challenge is just, the day changes from a work standpoint, but being isolated. But it's kind of been, it's the opportunity to kind of grow a little more, and it just kind of makes you value what's going to happen after everything settles down. So when we get back in the office, definitely going to value those, after work drinks or after work gatherings a little more, versus just saying, hey, I'm going to go home and go to bed early. So yeah, a lot has changed, but I kind of look at it as a positive, and the ability to, the opportunity to like grow and learn for the future.
Yeah, for me, I work for Sherwin and I work on the sales side. So I think Lindsey or Vinton had mentioned time management. For me, that's like the number one thing. You pretty much have your goal that you have to hit, and then you figure out how you hit it. So similar to Lindsey, like I spend a lot of my day meeting with customers, solving issues, looking at projects, and helping provide the right solution for their projects. Part of my day is spent with customers. Part of my day is spent with my actual servicing stores, giving them the tools and training that they need. And then part of it is just touching base with, my counterparts or the people that or the other groups that I'm a part of within our company, and getting things done there. So for me, when you talk about transitioning from having such a regimented schedule in sports of, you wake up, you do lift, you wake up, or you go to lift and you go to class and you have practice or film session. In this in my role, at least, you have to create your own schedule. So being able to allocate the right amount of time to get the most done or be more productive is definitely a skill that has helped me in my position right now. In terms of the pandemic, if anything, our industry kind of shot up because everybody was home and everyone's doing all these projects and everything like that. So it changed in the sense of you're not really going out and meeting people face to face. Maybe you're meeting people through FaceTime or texting or calling people. But in terms of still like the actual work activities, it's been pretty consistent, just adapting to what the rules and regulations are. So that's how I would say my daily week goes.
Yep. And like I mentioned, I work at TribalVision, which is a marketing and advertising agency. So very similar to what Lindsey does. You know, we're in client services, and how we work with our clients. It could be, you know, putting together an entire marketing plan or working on a very, very specific project with them. So no day is ever the same. You wear a lot of hats, especially in client services when things can change on the drop of a dime. But essentially it's, you know, a combination of managing the account, putting together a project plan that's actionable, that's profitable for us, and within the budget of the client, and obviously in alignment with their goals. There's a lot of implementation, so still kind of in the weeds, but overseeing that, and obviously managing an internal team. So it's a lot, it's busy, but it helps the day go by fast. And fortunately, during the pandemic, we had already worked from home a couple days a week. So that transition to fully remote wasn't too difficult at all. There was, you know, some turnover naturally, but some of our clients, this was a time for them to, you know, really take advantage of their marketing budget. And some obviously had paused, but overall, it's been a pretty smooth transition. I think, you know, as you guys have learned with learning virtually, I think this will be something that, you know, is offered to people going forward once this pandemic subsides, if it subsides, where there'll always be an option to be remote. And I think you guys having this ability to do that now is going to set you up for success.
And my experience is a little bit different from a pandemic standpoint because I was always in retail, and I guess the hardest part about retail is when things are bad enough for everybody else to stay home, you need to go to work that much more. So I remember all the Target days where it would Boston snowstorms, like, well, we're open, so we're going to work. And even more so now, I think in tech, everybody going remote meant everybody needed devices and they relied on their devices that much more. So the pandemic hit us twofold. I think as an organization, Apple was the first large retailer to shut down and shut down completely. So we had to take, and we didn't lay off anybody, not a single person in our workforce. So we had to figure out how we can have an entire workforce of people that are used to working in a retail store and continue to figure out ways to develop them and pay them and have them working, because we didn't want to cut back hours, and we knew financially there were a lot of people that were struggling. So as an organization, it was great to see that we can continue to help people that really needed it during that time. But then what do? We had to completely change our model and our operating model on how we work, because there's no store to put anybody in. So we transitioned about 15 to 20,000 people into our .com space to help everyone that couldn't get to an Apple location. We shipped them all iMacs and laptops and trained them in a month. And before we knew it, we had to mobilize an entirely different workforce because the demand was different. And as the stores open back up, we see people that come in that really rely on these devices. And from a sales standpoint, we were able to do a lot of good. We were able to donate a ton of devices to underprivileged areas for kids to be able to do homeschool, and for healthcare workers to have the devices that they needed to manage the pandemic and the uptick that they saw in people going into the hospitals and needing to open up new hospital sites. So it was amazing to see the company kind of lead from the front and do what it needed to do to help during a pandemic. But from a work day-to-day standpoint, my job completely changed. I went from helping small businesses find solutions inside of an Apple location and helping them buy a couple devices to go to using an iPad for a point of sale for a small company. And that was a big deal. And then now when we come back, everyone wants to go contactless payment, and they have queue systems and concierge services because they can't let anyone in the buildings. And because the workforce changes, the devices that they need to manage that also change drastically. So our business completely got flipped upside down. But the good thing is in tech that you're typically ready for this kind of thing. So from a day to day, my job went from in an Apple store every day to at home every day to hybrid And then now back hybrid again, at home some days and back into an Apple store. So you guys are going to be really good at figuring out the back and forth, because it was something that we never had to experience before.
Awesome, thank you. I think Jessica's gonna say a couple of things now.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't think we have any further questions in the chat, but we do still have a few minutes. So I will ask the panelists to just stay on. If there's anyone on the call that wanted to ask something personal or wasn't comfortable speaking in front of the group, feel free to stay on. We'll hang around for a few minutes and you can join us and ask your questions. But I did want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you, Lindsey, for moderating our panel. And thank you to all of our panelists for sharing your expertise and your wonderful advice. Again, this is such a unique year. And, you know, I think what you've said has been really helpful for anyone thinking about going into the workforce, but specifically for this year. So we really, really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to talk with all of us. So again, if you want to stay on for a few minutes, and if anyone has any personal questions that they want to ask, feel free to hang around. Otherwise, have a wonderful evening.